Well, for this week's episode, we left the capital for my hometown of Melbourne, and it's the 11th episode, so I've brought along an 11-year-old whiskey. This is from Caol Ila, which means the sound of Ila in Gaelic. Ila, the sound between Ila and Jura. Distilled in 2001, bottled in 2013. So looks like 12, but they actually discount the year of the bottling to make it officially an 11-year-old single malt. And this is a Gordon and MacPhail bottling, so there are a few independent bottlers of Scotch single malt whiskey. They obtain the distillate from the distilleries and privately age the whiskey in their own storage for the casks and bottle it independently. And there are a large number of connoisseurs' choice whiskies in our little collection, so we'll have a bit of that later. The book this week is called Super Sense. I won't go into it too much. It's by Bruce Hood. It's one of these last gasp efforts by Dawkins and his posse to try and convince the world somehow that there's no God. He is sort of, they won't give up until, they'll never give up until such time as they have evidence to the contrary. And I mean, that's where these people come from. They have that philosophical problem that they believe that because something behaves in a particular way, in a consistent manner, it always behaves in that way, or always by experiment proves that it behaves in that way, that therefore that must be the way it is. And he sort of gives this away in the book, where he says that we're naturally inclined towards supernatural beliefs. Many highly educated and intelligent individuals experience a powerful sense that there are patterns, forces, energies and entities operating in the world that are denied by science because they go beyond the boundaries of natural phenomena we currently understand. More importantly, such experiences are not substantiated by a body of reliable evidence, which is why they're supernatural and unscientific. The inclination or sense that they may be real is our super sense. Okay, so, it's only going to take one example of things not happening quite the way these people doggedly are assured that they do happen, that is going to make them change their mind. But we've been developing this series towards the real meat of the program. When NASA built not NASA actually, it wasn't the high S1 dam, it was the low S1 dam was being built. It's just concrete gravity dam across the Nile. In fact, just near the island of Philae, which is what the lander on the comet, recent lander on the comet is named after. The low S1 dam, they had to span the gorge without sort of laying cable along the ground, and so they got a very thin gossamer thread sent across. Legend has it by a pigeon, some sort of homing bird, took a very thin thread across the gorge. It's an age-old story. With that thin thread, you then tie a bit of cotton, bring that cotton back, then a piece of string, then a piece of fine rope, then a piece of thicker rope. And eventually you get a cable. You put a cable across the span, and you can start carrying buckets of concrete and laying the low Aswan Dam. But we're developing towards that point where we can start sort of getting excited about how this world's going to develop, and we can start thinking in terms of immortality. So Cyndi Lauper sings a song about money changes everything. Well, immortality changes everything quite fundamentally. You know, if you're going to live a little bit longer than 70 years, if you're going to live forever, which is the sort of idea that people like Jesus and in fact Paul had going around in their heads when they started talking about things that people like Bruce don't quite understand. I mean, they think that people like Jesus and Paul, people like Bruce Hood and Dawkins and others, think that Jesus, Paul, these were guys that just sort of sat down one day and thought, oh, let's sort of make up a myth, let's make up some sort of story about where we all come from. These guys have a much more intimate and very serious relationship with the system that's running this place. And immortality does indeed change everything. And in an earlier episode, we talked about Paul saying that when we become a man, we put childish things away. Jesus also talked about the kingdom of heaven being understood by a child. It is really child's play to start talking about how things work in terms of immortality. Once we all live forever, there's no limit to how much wealth we can all attain. There's no limit to, there's no time restraint on how long it takes us to build, the most palatial mansion for everyone. I mean, Jesus says, in my Father's house there are many mansions. He could, I guess, have imagined that there would be no limit to how long it takes to build the celestial city. John of Patmos talks about the New Jerusalem and talks in terms of it being paved with gold, and it's quite an amazing discourse that he leads into about what this place looks like. But it's a real place. It's not some imaginary place that sort of exists out beyond the stars, although as we've touched on earlier, there are plenty of other planets in the universe which have people who have long since sort of moved past where we are into sort of the sort of eternal kingdom or sort of eternal milieu. Money changes everything. Immortality changes everything. And so at the moment, we've got the Chinese economy in a bit of trouble. They're a bit frightened about what's happening in Greece. But we'll see how that comes, what comes of that. But we also have a bit of agitation at the moment with the Aboriginal community, looking to have some sort of recognition of their original inhabitation of Australia. And before Australia was colonised by Europeans, or by the British originally. And my late mother-in-law was an Aboriginal sympathiser, and in fact probably an empathiser, and she really said how with the Australian Aboriginal we have a cultural gem, a living treasure, because you've got this Paleolithic culture that is extant. I mean, it's still there, and you can study it, and it's a fantastic thing. But once the kingdom of heaven comes, once we sort of move into the new world, we'll be talking about writing a new constitution. So, America wrote its constitution, Australia wrote its constitution. In a sense, Britain has the Magna Carta, which is sort of a default constitution. And when the New Jerusalem comes, or when basically the planet becomes one unified place where it all happens, we're going to think about writing a new constitution for the planet. In fact, I was just at a restaurant last night called Burma Lane, fabulous sort of fusion Asian cooking in Melbourne, and it was playing all this sort of 60s and 70s prog rock. They had the Who, take a bow to the new constitution. You know, we pick up your guitar and play, and we'll get on our knees and pray, etc. You all know the song. And I thought, yeah, we're getting pretty close to that. But, you know, these guys were singing about it 30, 40, 50 years ago. And these things take time. You know, we've had to have developed all of the technology that we need in order to make the New Jerusalem. But we will start in the 12th episode looking very much more closely. As I say, we've now sort of stretched not the string but the cable, maybe not the steel cable, but you know, a pretty thick piece of rope across this gorge that exists between the old world, where you know people are living in the valley of the shadow of death, as it's called in the Christian literature. I mean, there's this chasm that separates people who believe that they're living in the shadow of death, i.e. they believe that they're going to die in 70 years' time, and then you've got the people who understand that there is this promise of immortality, and then there's a very small handful of people who understand that immortality is about immortality. It's about living. It's not about dying and going to some fanciful place called heaven. When you die, it's not about dying, it's about living. It's not only about living, but it's about the resurrection. And you know, in the 12th and 13th episodes, we're going to start touching on theodicy, which is primarily answering the problem that people like Bruce have as to why it is that we've had to have a world in which it seems so incredibly random and unfair, and how that works, and then the technology of the resurrection. How are all these people going to come back? Where are they at the moment? You know, are they in the ground? You know, are they pushing up the daisies? Where is the brain detail? What's happened to all of their memories? Where has this all gone? And yeah, we'll start talking about that. But we wouldn't be able to talk about this if it hadn't been for people like Bruce and Dawkins and even Laurie Krauss, God love him, having put their heart and soul into finding out, probably starting, you know, from the scientific revolution, from the Renaissance, from Newton and Galileo, Kepler, from that Copernicus, Bruno, that whole era where people started saying, this is God's world, He created it this particular way, and He's given us the ability with our intelligence to discover how it works. And we've been working towards finding out that information. And when we finally find out how the resurrection works and how we're all going to, you know, people who have died are going to come back, then we've sort of come full circle. We've actually, you know, got to know effectively what God knows, and we've sort of touched on who God is now at this stage. So hence this much thicker rope that's spanning this chasm between the valley of the shadow of death, where we're all dying, to the future where we have this immortality. And you know, in heaven, there are only the best single malt whiskies, particularly from Islay. There's vanilla, banana, slightly peated. This extraordinary meat shop flavour. I mean, it sounds strange, but and it's got legs too. You can see it streaming down there. Anyway, I must get ready to head back home to Canberra, and hopefully talk to you next week for episode 12. Okay then, bye.